Putin alternates between threats of a new offensive and offers of peace talks with Ukraine. On Tuesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin made statements about the Kremlin's readiness for peace talks and threats of a new Russian offensive to grab more Ukrainian land. Some of the most in-depth comments he has made about the conflict and his goals since sending the troops into Ukraine over 15 months ago came during a wide-ranging meeting with Russian military correspondents and war bloggers. Here is a summary of some of Putin's most important comments. Counteratack in the Ukraine. Putin said that Ukraine's counteroffensive has resulted in catastrophic losses. He claimed that on June 4 Ukrainian forces used their reserves to begin the large-scale operation, but that since then they have made no progress and lost 10 times as many soldiers as Russia. His statements were not able to be confirmed. Putin claimed that Russia lost 54 tanks while Ukraine lost 160 battle tanks and more than 300 other armored vehicles. He claimed that between a quarter and a third of the Western-supplied armored vehicles in Ukraine had been destroyed. With a wry grin on his face, he remarked that the German Leopard battle tanks and American Bradley infantry fighting vehicles are burning really well, adding that the Kievan government must now understand the catastrophic consequences of the counteroffensive. Reconsideration of terrain gain. According to Putin, Russia could respond to what he called Ukrainian incursions and shelling of Russia's border regions by creating a sanitary zone to isolate the area and make it unsafe for the Ukrainian military to operate. It would be impossible for the zone to penetrate to a depth that would prevent it from striking our territory, he said. Putin dodged the question of how far into Ukraine Russia could go by saying, "Everything will depend on potentials that emerge after the so-called counteroffensive. After assessing the situation, we will decide on our next moves," he said. "Our strategies vary from case to case." He stated that Russian troops already were near Kyiv, alluding to an abortive Kremlin attempt to seize the Ukrainian capital in the conflict's early weeks. As a result of the swift Ukrainian counteroffensive, Russian forces withdrew from the areas around Kyiv and the northeast of Ukraine in March 2022, and they withdrew from large swaths of the Kharkiv region in the fall. "Shall we revisit that location?" Putin added obliquely, "Only I could give an answer." The breakdown of Kakhovka Dam. Again, Putin pointed the finger at Ukraine, saying that Ukrainian forces had repeatedly shelled the Kakhovka Dam with HIMARS rockets and then apparently used explosives to destroy it, resulting in catastrophic flooding. "There was no good reason," he said, "for Russia to blow up the dam. For the territories under our control, we are certainly not interested in that," he said. Putin said Russia would have been pleased to see Ukraine try to launch an attack in that sector despite the daunting odds, dismissing the Ukrainian argument that Moscow blew up the dam to thwart Kyiv's counteroffensive. Talks for peace. The Russian leader has stated that the United States is responsible for ending hostilities in Ukraine. He claimed that a halt to arms deliveries from the United States and NATO to Ukraine would put an immediate end to the conflict. "Stopping the flow of weapons would be enough," he said, to force a negotiated end to the conflict. Putin claimed that in March of 2022, Russian and Ukrainian negotiators had drafted a peace agreement but that Kyiv had withdrawn from the deal due to pressure from the West. He assured them that Russia is still willing to talk. He claimed that the United States was banking on the Ukrainian counteroffensive in order to bring about the downfall of Russia. Putin also said, "There are many reasonable people who don't want to take it all the way to World War III, in which there will be no winners." Tactical relocation. In the fall, when Russia was facing a counteroffensive from Ukraine, Putin ordered the mobilization of 300,000 reservists. He has since said that another wave of mobilization may be necessary, depending on the military situation. But, he stressed, there is no need for it right now. Putin said that bringing in more reservists isn't necessary because the military has already enlisted 156,000 volunteers this year. He added that he disagrees with the idea that Russia should institute martial law. Putin noted that military production in Russia has increased dramatically. In some key areas, he said, production in Russia's defense industries has increased by 10 times in the past year. Grain pact. Putin stated that Moscow was contemplating withdrawing from the agreement to allow Ukrainian grain exports from Black Sea ports. Putin claimed that Western nations had broken their agreement with Turkey and the United Nations to ease restrictions on shipping, insurance, and banking operations in order to increase Russian agricultural exports. He claimed that Ukraine had used the commercial shipping lane opened up by the agreement to launch drones at Russian Navy vessels. Putin claimed that Russia extended the agreement multiple times because it wanted to help the world's poorest nations. He pointed out that Moscow would happily supply those countries with the same amount of grain that Ukraine would have delivered had it not opted out of the agreement. He said he wanted to talk about the plans with African leaders who would be visiting Moscow soon.